Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll discuss unlock your power, design your mind, shape your future, and live on your terms. With the speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. Welcome back, Vaish. Glad to have you on another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you for such a warm welcome, JM. I'm glad to be here. Good to see you, Charles. And Radhakripa, driving to the next destination. Jeanette, thanks for coming. C. Solano. Denise is here. And I'm very excited about today because I'm talking to myself. I remind myself regularly how lucky I am because I have a human body, which means possibilities. Any of you feel like that too? Means that you can decide what you want and go in a direction that is sanguine. So today, I'm going to cover a few principles that are highly recommended pretty much everywhere, but especially in the ancient wisdom literatures. I'm taking guidance from the Bhagavad Gita. Seems I have one other audience member here, a housefly, who's pretty excited about the program too. He's flying around everywhere. Hopefully he'll take in a few of the principles. So, hey, Rajiv, good to see you. Shiva, Jeanette, Nicholas, said hi to Charles. Pratima, thanks for joining. So we started last week with some mantra meditation, and it will be one of the elements of my talk today. So I thought it might be helpful to start off with some meditation. And for that, I'm going to switch over to original sound, which sounds nice. I don't know what the original sound of the universe is what we're going to go for. And I'm going to put a drone in the background for you all. And I'm going to start with the mantra Nitai Gauranga. So, Man means mind and Tra means to deliver. The mind is the reservoir of all ideas and changes. And there are different levels of mind. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali Muni talks about stilling the mind. And he claims that the mind is subjected to vrittis in Sanskrit. That literally means turnings. The mind's always turning. And when one is able to objectify the mind, watch those turnings and notice that they're going on, I'm observing them, I'm aloof from them. It's a first step in noticing that I'm not obligated to grab onto everything that comes into my mind. Don't believe everything you think. And don't feel obligated to speak it either, so that it perpetuates whatever's there. One of the ways of seeing the difference between ourselves and our life situation is to take a moment to observe one's inner workings. And so with this beautiful drone in the key of C, I'm going to repeat the mantra Nitai Gauranga. It refers to two avatars who appeared to bring the teachings of yoga, especially bhakti yoga, in the present age, which is so full of options, quarrels, disagreements. And by repeating the mantra Nitai Gauranga, it opens the heart chakra. One's able to feel gratitude in the moment. So if you like to try this, sit up a little straighter than you were a second ago. Try closing your eyes. And behind muted mics, you can follow along as I chant this mantra to the drone. Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga. Now just take a moment to notice how the vibration has gone into your ears, into your mental system, and also see if you can notice any churnings in the mind and be the witness of them. Notice that you're separate from them. Take a couple normal breaths. Maybe wiggle your fingers and toes, and then open your eyes and come back into the Zoom. And welcome back. So in today's presentation, I've promised the ways and means of unlocking your power. We're more powerful than we think. We have natural power that comes from our own consciousness. In fact, as we mentioned last week, we're creators. If you heard the directive, where attention goes, energy flows, well, if you've been around me, you've heard it, because I say it all the time. There's something very powerful about our glance, even. If you look at something or someone, that object begins to rearrange itself. In fact, that's a scientific principle that you can never look at a pristine environment, because as soon as you start observing it, it changes. And our interaction with the world is consequential. Our interaction with others is consequential, and their interaction with us is consequential. Everything's consequential. Consequential. By the way we move in this world, we're creating consequences, sometimes called karma. Whatever you do rebounds to you. So unlocking our power, not misusing it or wasting it, is one of the topics of Bhakti Yoga. How to use the lifetime that you have now as a human being, which is noted in the wisdom literatures as a vehicle. In fact, it says it's a boat. Human body is called Nri in Sanskrit. Nri Deham means the human body. Sulabham Sudulabham means it's very rare to get. You can't put in for it. You just get it, like winning the lottery, because even if you put in for it, it doesn't mean you're going to get it. And then this ancient verse from wisdom literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, says that the body is a suitable boat to cross over all of the troubles of this world. And you need some wind, It's a sailboat. And you also need instruction. For instance, a sea captain. And then you can achieve that which is practically inconceivable to the human mind and don't accept the status quo. We can rise above our perceived limitations. So let's get started. What's the subtitle in the first slide? That is the introductory slide. Schematic has music that goes with it. What does that say? Don't worry, I'll look at it. I just have to increase my slides. It says, design your mind, shape your future, live on your own terms. I like that. Means we can be self-directing rather than submitting ourselves to tyranny. Tyranny where? Especially the ancient wisdom literature say our own unruly mind or senses. Don't stay under the bad mastership of your own senses or mind. Tame the mind, tame the senses, and become self-directing. So the first slide, I'm going to discuss them and then ask for your reflection or any questions to expand the conversation. Does that sound okay to everybody? JM said yes. Shiva said yes. Rajiv's always ready to interact. Okay. Program your life or it will be programmed for you. I looked up the word program. Pro means before, and gram means to write. There's some sense here that we have the wherewithal to write down what we want to do. Around the first of the year, I always talk about planning your life. I go back to an admonition that Jim Rohn gave frequently, said, decide what you want and write it down. Program means decide what you want and write it down. So be deliberate about what you put into your body, mind, and spirit. This is one of the first points. We're very porous. Physically, there's a lot of openings. There's the ears, the eyes, the nose. They're taking in information from the environment all the time. And we're affected even on very subtle levels by the mindsets of others that we're around, how we affected subtly. If they think in certain ways, speak in certain ways, and then we take on their programs. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that it's important to be deliberate. And this word, deliberate, has the word Libra in it. If you have ever seen the astrological signs, the Libra is the scales. And the scales that you see sometimes in rural marketplaces, they have a weight on one side and you put some vegetable on the other side and you weigh it out. And so to deliberate means to think carefully about what's most important in your life and decide what it is, write it down. And when you deliberate, you can become deliberate. And that's something Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Vyavasayatmika buddhir eki hakununandana, bahushaka hinantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam, Sanskrit. He says, when you deliberate and you're very deliberate about what your purpose is in life and what direction you're going, then your mind is one-pointed. Ek means one. On the other side, if you don't decide what you want, of course, we know the lyric from Alice in Wonderland, that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. It really doesn't matter which road you take because you haven't decided where you want to go. So Krishna says Bahu, which means unlimited, Bahu Shaka, which means branches. Bahu Shaka hi Anantas. Anantas means unlimited. There's unlimited directions your mind can go and does go until you decide what your real purpose is. Make your priorities. That's what makes human life special, is you can decide. Beavers don't decide. They just build dams. If you let a beaver off somewhere, he'll go start chopping a tree down to see if he can make a dam. Even if it's inside your house, he'll just chew up your furniture and make it into a dam because he's got his own program. But humans have this uncanny sense of deciding their own purpose. And that's also discussed in the ancient wisdom literature as dharma. We can decide what's most suitable for us, what will sustain us. Dharma comes from a root word in Sanskrit, which means to sustain, what actually sustains us. So be deliberate about what you put into your body, mind, and spirit. And put into means there's an obvious relationship between the way your body feels and looks and what you put into it. That we know. Everybody knows that. And then how about your mind? It doesn't matter, right? You can put any old thing in your mind and it doesn't make any difference. What do you think? Agree or disagree? It does make a difference because the mind is a recorder. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the ways in which when we expose our minds to various influences, the mind develops programs, ways of thinking. In fact, he mentions what's called purva samskar. Purva means previous, and samskar means impressions. We're even born with those from our previous lives. Our subtle body, which is called the mind, is like a cloud. It records everything. It's in there, and it influences us. In fact, the mind, Krishna says in the Gita, has powers over us until we learn how to control it. And he mentions the riding of a horse. If you're able to tame a horse, you can have a wonderful relationship with the horse. But if the horse is wild, you'll just be thrown off. And the mind can throw us off. So be careful what you put into your mind. And also, beyond the mind, this is a concept that is sometimes overlooked. There's, we say here, spirit, but I like the word consciousness better. Consciousness is different than even the mind, according to the Bhagavad Gita. There's this hierarchy that Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that, first of all, there's the senses. Above the senses is the mind, which is the clearinghouse for all the information that is gathered through the senses. And above the mind is the intellect. It has the intellect. It has a quality called vivek, which means to discriminate what to do, what not to do. But above even the intellect, called buddhi, is the atma, which is the conscious being that animates the intellect, the mind, and the senses. As soon as that particle of consciousness leaves the present body, you'll notice that the body becomes lifeless. How does it become lifeless? When the consciousness leaves the body. So that's what we say here is the spirit. Spirit is more subtle than the mind, more subtle than the intelligence. And therefore, when we're able to imbibe, word that really literally means to drink, we're able to take in spiritual vibration. There are sources of those. We did it in the beginning with the mantra. Spiritual sound vibration purifies the consciousness. That's who we are. It uncovers us. In fact, one of the oldest books from the ancient wisdom literatures called the Vedanta Sutra, says, Anavriti Shabdat. Shabdat means sound. So by sound, you'll become purified. You'll purify your consciousness. You'll unburden yourself. Sound is so powerful. So what do you put in to your body? Well, hopefully you eat that which is good for you. Then the mind, if you're able to study, for instance, Bhagavad Gita, there's a way in which your mind becomes determined to go in a direction that is helpful. Mind we're combining with intelligence, and you develop vivek, discrimination. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to decide between one thing and another, and you chose the right thing, first of all, you had the sense of discrimination to choose the right thing, and then after you chose it, you realized that you had done the right thing. And the opposite could happen too. You might have choices and you choose the wrong thing, and then lament that I wish that I had had a stronger sense of discretion. That requires deliberation. Think about what you're doing before you do it. That's program. Have your own program. Pro means before, and gram means to write. So write down what you want for your life. Otherwise, as I claim here in this slide, in parentheses, somebody else will decide your program for you and say, okay, you don't have a proper program, so you take our program. And years ago, there's a famous musician called named George Harrison, and he wrote a song that I heard a couple of times. It has some humorous parts to it, but he went on and on in the song, which I think was the name of the record album it came from, called Brainwashed. And he lists an endless number of ways in which we become programmed or brainwashed by our environment, by other people's ideas. And the wisdom literature say you're a very powerful entity. You have discrimination, but you have to develop it. And then you can decide on a program for yourself. So that's the first slide. And let's see if we can stimulate some conversation. Means anything that you heard from the monologue, me riffing off the slide here, that struck you in any way that you found helpful, you can reflect it back. Or if you have a question, say, you said this, like Sheshika, so why don't you explain yourself at this time? We'll give you the opportunity. Oh,
Yeah,
look,
good.
it's Charles. Okay, JM, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, by Jessica Prabhu,
Hey,
welcome,
for you.
welcome back. It's so great
Thank you very much.
to be in this session. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But yeah, I loved how you broke down the word program. Makes a lot of sense. I was wondering if you could, maybe expand a little bit. After we've sort of written down what we want our lives to look like, written down our goals, what are kind of the next steps to actually manifest those things? And I'm also wondering beyond that, how does the universe, it's kind of a big question, but how does the universe, the world, nature kind of work and conspire to help those things actually manifest? So I guess what is our role, and then how does the universe kind of play into that as well in terms of helping things manifest?
You're so intuitive, Charles, as usual. Those are the next slides coming up. And just to give a brief answer, because I'm going to go into it in a little more detail after the first slide, and you don't have to show these, Jim, I'll just say them, and then we can look at them later, is the first one I talk about is designing the soundtrack for your life. Next one is committing to making incremental improvements. I call those voluntary life improvements. As you can either do it voluntarily or or things will be forced upon you, habits will be forced upon you. The next one is going to be about cultivating habit patterns that take you towards your goal. And then the last one is about taking responsibility for refining your desires because, and this answers the last part of your question, and I'll go into it in detail. The world responds to our desires, and it does so perfectly. This is the claim of the Sri Upanishad that says the world is perfectly responding to us. So getting in tune with that idea is extremely important because that's what the meaning of responsibility is. Take responsibility for whatever you have now and for whatever kind of habits you have now, take responsibility, and then you can improve. Fantastic questions, and right in line with what I was about to say. And now I'm going to be even more eager to go into detail. Okay, JM, there's more.
Thanks. We have Raji. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to say that as much as we think we know, when you say something like we are very porous, it's a very it jolts you into realizing that yes, indeed we are, and especially these days, given how much we are sinking in the social media world.
Thanks, Raji. Yeah, I thought that one day I was looking at my arm and I was noticing that it's full of holes. And then I realized my whole body is just like a huge sponge. And everywhere I go, I'm drinking in whatever's happening. So I better be careful. Thanks, Raji. Great to have you here. Really nice
I have
point.
a comment.
JM, you're the moderator.
So, yeah, sure. I think Shiva will come. Rajeshwari, Manu, and then Shiva.
Okay.
Yeah, all glories to Prabhupada, and thank you for this wonderful session, Prabhuji. And then actually the topic itself is really powerful. I think the first line that you had, you program your life, else something else will program it for you. It's just literally, it's like out of the world. And as you think more and more about it, you start realizing how you could have at this point, like when I'm looking back, I can think and I can find out so many instances where maybe I could have taken different decisions and I didn't. Maybe that's why I'm here. Not, but coming for today's class itself is like really, I'm grateful because I had a choice at 10 o'clock when I saw this message. There is this session today, whether I want to come or not. And every time I think, okay, lunchtime, I might have another meeting or something like that. Today I just said, okay, I'm going to block this for this. So I think, making these decisions in life is so powerful. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder, Rajeshri. It's so important to be reminded every day because the mind has a tendency to become distracted and to go in many different directions. There's a book, which I'm sure you're aware of, called The Paradox of Choice. We may notice that we can get overwhelmed by so many choices. To get to that point of Ekeha Kurunandana, what is most important to me? Which direction do I want to go? And then making choices based on that. It feels so good. So every day we make the right choices. We know we're moving in the right direction. Okay, Shivaji.
Okay, hi. Yeah, so this conversation so far, reminded me of this thing called auto-suggestion. I used to read a book called Think and Grow Rich back when I was in 8th or 9th grade. So I wanted to, become rich or learn how to become rich back then. Yeah, so it's kind of, this point about being deliberate kind of reminded
Very
me.
much so. Very much so. That book is really about getting clear about what you want and focusing on it. It's one of the topics Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita. He takes a little more of an existential approach. And of course, whatever we gain in this lifetime, and it is important to have some gains to be balanced in our lives, but then the overall thrust of his philosophy is that we're going to leave this body and it can happen at any point. And the way we've focused ourselves, the habit patterns we've developed, it all adds up to a bhava, or an overwhelming feeling. So in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yang yang vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram, that whatever you have cultivated, the sum total of your desires, that's going to compel you to accept another situation in the next life. It's all based on what we've done, what we've cultivated. And that Think and Grow Rich is so insightful that it's coming from us. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Jam, somebody else had their hand up, I
Yeah,
think.
Manu was there. Manu, go ahead.
You don't want to miss Manu.
I also resonate with what Rajeshwari was saying, that such an amazing first slide. And I was just reflecting because this week we had a developer conference and it was all about robots merging with AI. And I could see that how this fits, right? Like they program them and they behave the way, the robots behave the way we want them to behave and react. And same way, like I could notice that it could not, even the robots need a recharge.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And in many ways, the function of our body is robotic. I often refer to my body as my robot. It's when it's doing something like, oh yeah, my robot, I have to rein it in a little bit, reprogram it. Because it's amazing if you notice just physically how these robots that we're driving around in are susceptible to the environment. For instance, with food, you can weigh yourself and you notice that if you eat more, then the robot hangs on to certain things and your body gets shaped in a particular way. Same thing with your mind, and it affects us spiritually as well. Well, thanks. Great reciprocation here today. Let's go to the next slide so we keep on time. As I mentioned earlier, one of the main principles is designing the ideal soundtrack for your life. So this is one of the main principles of the ancient wisdom literatures, which are themselves, the name of these ancient literatures is called Shruti. Shruti means what you hear. And of all the senses, the hearing sense of hearing, is the one that especially programs us. And if you consider everything you listen to in a day, and we do have our tendencies, don't we, to listen to particular things. I mean, what do you listen to when you get in the car, for instance? Or what do you listen to at home? What do you listen to at night? What do you listen to in the morning when you wake up? The ancient wisdom literatures say, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. The Sanskrit means there's a way in which everything that you're listening to is reprogramming your mind and your heart, and it's affecting you spiritually, either positively or negatively. And if you think about movies, the old so-called silent films were not silent. In the beginning, they had a live piano player or organ player at the soundtrack. And then later, when recording and speakers came in, they used those. And now when you listen to a movie, can you imagine if you had a movie with no sound? It's not very compelling. The sound makes it evokes certain emotions and so forth. What to speak of language, what we say, how we say it. So thinking about designing the soundtrack for your life from morning to evening, that's one of the practices of Bhakti Yoga, a way to unleash your power, your spiritual power, to develop discrimination, to enrich yourself from the inside out. So the sound goes in, and the sound reprograms what's inside us. And therefore, there's this phrase underneath the design the ideal soundtrack for your life, in which I've written, if you don't like what you're being subjected to, change the subject. I thought of this one day when I was standing in line at a grocery store. And something I don't do very much nowadays. But nonetheless, I was standing in line at the grocery store and I noticed that the managers had strategically placed a television in front of each line. So if you're waiting in line, you could gaze on the television. Then I noticed they started doing it at gas stations too. You get out to pump gas, and then a little TV's on the side of the gas pump. Then they're in airplanes behind. I mean, some of the United flights now, they don't have them because they figure everyone brings their own equipment. But there's a television on the back of every seat. And I noticed one day that I was looking at it and I couldn't hear what it was saying, but there were captions, closed captions. And it was really bothering me what person was saying. I mean, that's not hard to do nowadays. People seem to be very bothered in many ways. Just tune into anything on social media or on television and you think, ah. And I thought to myself, well, why are you listening to it then? Or in other words, I'm talking to myself, why are you subjecting yourself to this? And so I came up with this phrase, if you don't like what you're being subjected to, change the subject. And that's something that you can engineer in your life. Be an engineer of the soundtrack of your life. As soon as you do that, like Shiva, that's one of the things in that book about Think and Grow Rich. It means, decide we won't read it to yourself over and over again. And so I'm just saying the kind of things that you listen to, maybe think they're innocuous, or you may not think about it at all. You might just think, well, it's the only thing within reach, or I'm used to doing this. But consider, what if you had a better soundtrack? Morning, afternoon, evening. What would it do to your consciousness? Well, the ancient wisdom literature say it'll transform you from the inside out, just the sound you hear. And can you do that? Well, especially nowadays, the technologies that we have, you can choose your own playlist. And so what are you going to put in it? Think about it. What is the level of the consciousness of those who are singing the song? Why are they singing it? What are they saying? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. That's what goes in. JM, shall we take a few reflections on soundtrack? Linda's already got her hand up before JM could even get back. Okay. Linda, please go ahead.
Hi, I've been away from you guys for about a year, so I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to my beautiful friend Manu, who shared the link with me. Looking at this part of the reflection, about a year ago, I was working nonstop, taking care of my mom, and literally never taking a break. And I was like on autopilot, and I kept thinking, why am I so unhappy? And then I became ill, and I was forced out of that environment. And to all of a sudden have silence allowed me to actually think about the soundtrack of my life. What am I doing? Why was I pushing myself like that? Why can't I say no? Why can't I stop? So I think for me, it's almost like sometimes you need to be pushed out of the noise to actually hear what's really meant for you. And it did help me. I actually made the difficult decision of resigning from my high stress job because I couldn't do both with my health issues. And although I'm not employed right now, I'm still feeling so good that I got pushed into that so that I could look and reflect on my life.
That's a very encouraging point, Linda. Thank you very much, and welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Manu.
Feeling better also. And thank you, Manu, too.
Yes, much better.
Oh, good. Another a point about when we have some sense of what's best for us, even if we can't do it right away, sometimes circumstances change. And then rather than feeling hopeless when those what we might call a reversal of fortune takes place, or as Louis Pasteur said, great discoveries come only unto the prepared mind. So if we're preparing, even if we're not in an ideal circumstance, then sometimes when, as you mentioned, Linda, we're pushed out of a situation, we just can't take it anymore, or somebody else pushes us, we know where to go. That's the other aspect of program. Know which program you want to take. And it's not always that you can take it right away, because the currents of this world are very strong, and we may be carried along. Like, there are various kinds of addictions, multiple addictions we can be involved with. And unless there's some preparation and a step-by-step process to overcome whatever they are, it's very difficult to break out of those patterns. So getting prepared, and also I love the concept of getting fed up. That's enough. Enough's enough. That's it. I'm gonna do what I have to do for myself to make progress personally. That's also something that comes up in the wisdom literatures, where there are various iconic characters who say, that's it, no more of this. Whatever it is, it's got to be better than this. So yeah, and I echo your accolades for Manu. Thank you, Manu, for always being there for all of us. Sorry, didn't mean to embarrass you. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's go to the next slide.
We did
Oh,
have
yeah.
one. We did have one couple of comments which came in. One from Sundar, who said, "I like your acronym KTTVG. Keep the transcendental vibration going." To which Rajiv responded, "That would be a good station name, Radio KTTVG."
That's the station that Rajiv tuned into, obviously. Thank you very much, both of you. Okay, here we go. Unleashing your power, unlocking your power as a conscious being. Next one is to commit to making incremental improvements. Commitment is so lovely. That's something else we can do as humans. We can decide to do something. And I say incremental because anything can be achieved step by step. When we look at the whole, it seems insurmountable. That is, reaching the goal. It seems that there are insurmountable odds. We're already programmed in a certain way. How are we ever going to get there? Give an example. I just met my music teacher. I had been away. He'd been in a different place, and we just had a session the other day. He gave me a more difficult piece I was working on. And I always notice that the mind has this initial reluctance. It's like, how are you going to do this? It's impossible. But with a little improvement every day, it's amazing. Just the piece he gave me, with a little improvement every day, I suddenly felt, well, what's the problem? What I didn't know on Monday, I can know on Thursday with a little improvement, or I should say incremental improvement. And then there's the concept of voluntary life improvements, voluntary life improvements, the VLIs. These mean that you have to search your own heart and say, do I want to be subjected to what I'm being subjected to now? Or am I going to voluntarily, heroically make a stand in this world and make an incremental improvement in one area or another in my life? And you can make a list of these things. So the thing is, reason they're voluntary is because most of what we do is done involuntarily. I mean, we didn't necessarily ask to be born in this world, but we just end up here. We don't ask to die, but that's forced upon us also. I mean, take these two bookends, and we can see that we're pretty much helpless in this world in many, many ways, but not always. We have our independent will. And part of that free will means to decide what's good for me and then make a list. That's your VLIs. Make a list of VLIs, voluntary life improvements you're going to make. And then take an incremental approach to it. And immediately you'll start to feel worthwhile, that your life is worthwhile. Oftentimes, I find myself, and I hear it from many others, feeling guilty, I'm not doing enough, or why can't I do what I want to do, and so forth. Well, this is one of the ways to break free. And the rest of the slide says, make preemptive choices based on sound knowledge and guidance. So I'm a big fan of that. They're experts in everything. There are people who are standouts in many different fields, and I try to connect with them. There's a family that my wife and I have been friends with and visiting for over 25 years. On a regular basis, we watched their son grow up, and he was homeschooled. And I always admired, or I could even say was jealous. He, as a child, had the best of teachers in everything, music, writing, because they could just choose. Okay, who's the best at this? Who's the best at that? And then their son could associate with that person. And now I've realized that that is one of the best ways to develop new habits, is to find somebody who's really turning and then see if you can't get in their association. It's a way to improve yourself, way to develop a new skill. Even if you have to pay them, pay them. If you have to do some service, which is exactly what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, find somebody with knowledge who's really got their habits in order, and then approach in a submissive mood. Do some service and ask relevant questions. That's how you become wise yourself. And finally, do what you can now voluntarily before it is done unto you. So for instance, let's just say you wanted to give in charity. And then you decided not to give in charity for one reason or another. And then your house got burgled, and the $50 that you had been thinking about giving, but then you held back and you didn't give it, it gets stolen. How do you feel now? JM, put us back in the Zoom room, would you? I'm going to tell you a joke. So there were two guys walking down the street in the city. I'm not going to say which city because I don't want to make anyone feel bad. And a robber jumped out from behind a recycle bin and held a gun and said, listen, both of you, give me all your money. And one of them said, okay, no problem. I'll give you all my money. But one thing first, he pulled out his wallet and he took the money from his wallet and he handed it to his friend. He said, Steve, here's the $50 I owe you. Thing is that if we don't become proactive, it's already done to us. Everything will be taken from us. In fact, we don't really have anything. It's only on loan. Everything's on lease, and we don't know when the lease is going to be revoked. So if you can use something for a good cause, I gave the example of money. If you have an opportunity to do something that is extraordinarily beneficial for yourself or for other people, don't wait.
Yeah.
Do it and define your life. It's very similar to what I said earlier about frame or be framed.
Denise has a point to make.
Whoa, I want to hear from Denise. Are you
Hi,
in
thank
Canada now?
you.
Are
I
you?
couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. I don't know if they have that function here, so I thought I would just
Okay.
put it in the chat. It's so interesting that you shared that example of money. I had something happen 3 weeks ago, and I had to change my way of looking at it. So I went on a vacation to Zihuatanejo, Mexico. It's like very far south. I had never been to that area. And we stayed not where all the big resorts are. We stayed more where the local people are, which was really nice. But it was really hard for me to see all the kids, like trying to sell you chiclets for just so much little money. And I had just been so stressed recently with work and feeling overwhelmed. My last day there, I decided to go take $500 US dollars out of my bank account, but I got it in pesos. And to them, that's so much money. And I went around and I handed it out to families or little children who were asking for things. And then I found a pet shelter. I saw a bunch of stray cats. So I went and I donated to that as well. And then I lost my wallet that had my last $100 in it. And I was so upset. And I lost my debit card in there. And I just kept being so mad I lost it. But then I started thinking, wherever I lost it, whoever found it, I had planned on donating that money when I saw somebody that needed it. And so I had to rethink likely who found it needed that money because most of the locals in that area really are in need. I think had a tourist found it, they probably would have called my bank and, it has the 800 number on your bank card. I was able to get a new bank card, no problem, but I couldn't get over losing that $100. And then I thought to myself, wait, I was there to give that money. I didn't lose anything. That money was no longer mine because I went with the intention to give it. And it was so funny how I got so hung up on feeling mad that I lost money when I went there to do something good. And then I was able to just reframe the thought and think, I didn't lose anything. And then my anger just went away. And so it was just you bringing that up just reminded me. It's a perfect example of how you look at things. Your reality is really based on how your mind chooses to see things.
What a fascinating thought experiment, and it's real. And it illustrated the point so well. And I was thinking also, you already gave away the other ones. So even though you lost $100, the other ones you voluntarily gave away.
Yes, exactly.
So you were exempted from that. It's just you get the credit.
Yeah, I didn't share that to get credit or anything, but it was
I
more
know.
personal.
I'm not saying you
Yeah.
were, but I'm just saying that, it's spiritual credit or the feeling that you gave it away rather than losing it, and reframing it the way you did because you were already in that flow of giving and giving. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Denise.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate these sessions always when I'm able to make them.
Well, you always add something special. That's a fact. JM, shall I go to the last couple slides? I can read lips. And also, I noticed you put it up. So here we go. Cultivate habit patterns. I love this. I stole that phrase, habit patterns, from Brian Tracy. I've always appreciated it because I noticed that the brain develops its own patterns. It has neuroplasticity. And if you read something, if you listen to something, the brain just starts to develop a new neural pathway to accommodate it. And you can cultivate habit patterns in the same way. They are ingrained in us when we deliberately cultivate them. They become ingrained in us. And if you consider this, I read this a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago. Whatever you're doing, you're practicing. Consider, let's just say you spent more time than you plan to just randomly look at a screen, like on a phone. That's a practice. And you're programming your mind to do that. to sort of be random. Or nowadays things come in videos that are 10 seconds or 2 minutes, and your mind then gets programmed in that way. Is that the habit pattern you want? Remember, whatever you do, you're practicing. So cultivation of habit patterns that take you towards your goals, not away from them. That's something exciting. You get yourself going in a healthy direction for body, mind, spirit. And what is a habit? A settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. So if you can get used to doing the things that are taking you towards a higher level of consciousness, and those become hard to give up, you don't want to give them up because they feel so good to do. You'll feel extraordinarily empowered in your life, and it's all possible. And the last slide, take responsibility for what? For refining your desires. We can't stop desiring, says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, because it's the nature of consciousness to be creative and to desire various ingredients to interact with from this world, the thought world, the physical world. That's what consciousness means. We're not dead stones. And spiritual perfection doesn't mean that you become desireless, but it means you refine your desires. They become pure. And then the world responds to our desires. So the entire universe is accommodating, according to Bhagavad Gita. Whatever we want, it accommodates us. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us, if we're wise, to refine our desires, because the world responds to our desires. And finally, if you do not like what you are getting, change your desires. Now that sounds simplistic, and it is a little bit, because there are actions and reactions, says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, that take place in our lives based on what we've done before. And sorting one thing out from another is not just onerous, it's impossible. Nonetheless, if one is aware of the principle and accepts it, that the world is accommodating our desires, we'll be vigilant to refine our desires. Make sure you're desiring the right thing. In fact, you might have heard this lyric from a song, watch out, you might get what you're after. You desire something, do you really want it? Can you maintain that? Is it good for you? Is that what you really want? One choice like that, where you make the wrong choice, you can literally encumber yourself, your family, your finances, everything for an entire lifetime or more. So responsibility is important. If you drive down the wrong side of Highway 101 here, that's irresponsible. You should know the traffic laws. And we should similarly know the laws of the universe. That's what Bhagavad Gita says. Educate yourself. Okay, we have 1 minute for any last comment.
Yeah.
JM's got an announcement to make, I can tell.
See, Solano put on chat that videos are 15 seconds long. They've measured that's the current average attention span.
That's pretty long, actually. Attention span. Thank you for that statistic. It's very helpful. And that's something to be aware of. A.K. Hakurunandana is one of the teachings I mentioned from the Bhagavad Gita earlier. Can you be one-pointed, or are you harassed by your mind pulling you in every direction? It doesn't feel good. So yoga means to come back to what's most important in life. And we're so lucky. We have a human form. We can do this at any time. There's one last point here from Linda. May I read it? And then
Yeah,
we'll
please.
close. I found that just taking the first step makes a habit. I was isolated due to my health, but one day I took a walk just to the end of my cul-de-sac. And each day I was able to walk further. I did not think I would have the strength to walk, but when my own mind told me I could do it, even if it was a short walk, I felt so much better. Wow. Practical and so encouraging. Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you very much, everybody. It reminds me of the gratitude I see from the yogis high in the Himalayas. They come out of their caves, and from time to time, when they see one another, their colleagues who are also interested in self-realization, they become so enthusiastic and grateful that they have a colleague that's interested in the same thing. They raise their hands above their head and they say this phrase, Haribol, which is meant to encourage and said, keep the transcendental vibration going, KTTVG. Shall we try it? Hey, Nirali's here. Let's do it. Haribol!
Haribol!
Thanks, everybody.
Haribol!
Great to see you. Keep the transcendental vibration going, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, JM.